Hello and welcome to Farm Connections. I'm your host, Dan Hoffman. On today's episode, we visit the Pauley Alpaca Company in Rochester. Thiesse informs us about the Minnesota's changing dairy industry, and April Van Ruden joins us to discuss the inclusion of STEM and education into the Mower County 4-H program. All here today on Farm Connections.
Welcome to Farm Connections with your host, Dan Hoffman.
Farm Connections, sponsored by Alcorn Clean Fuel, a farmer-owned cooperative in Claremont, Minnesota, produces ethanol, high-protein livestock feed, and corn oil, and beverage-grade carbon dioxide for resale to benefit its members and their communities. Absolute Energy, a locally owned facility, produces 115 million gallons of ethanol annually, proudly supporting local economies in Iowa and Minnesota. Absolute Energy, adding value to the neighborhood. Southern Minnesota Center for Agriculture, promoting education and careers in agriculture, connecting students with college, curriculum, and industry resources to develop, fill, and sustain jobs with agriculture in our region.
We're at the Pauley Alpaca Company near Rochester, Minnesota, and with me is Brett Pauley. Welcome to Farm Connections.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Welcome.
Well, this is more of a farm than a company. How'd you come up with the name?
So PAC is the middle three letters of alpaca, and it also, by happenstance, lends itself nicely as an acronym for Pauley Alpaca Company.
It does, and what a nice place. Tell us about it.
Well, it's a 5-acre farm. It was originally the homestead of an 80-acre farm, but was split up back in the 90s. Our neighbors bought the other 75. But we have the original homestead and some of the original pasture area, and of course the barn that's behind us too, that we've been restoring and trying to turn the acreage that we do have back into a working small family farm.
It's a rolling topography, and you've repurposed it, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're establishing the pastures, the old ones were grown over with buckthorn and sumac and wild parsnip and
some nasty stuff.
Some nasty stuff, right? So we had to get that out of the way. So that was a couple years of scraping the ground and pulling stuff and burning stuff away, and getting some good and healthy thick foliage growing for the animals. But yeah, it's nice to see it kind of come back alive again.
It is neat.
Yeah.
Why alpaca?
It's kind of a funny story. We started years ago. It was we always wanted to move to the country, and after we met an alpaca at a petting zoo one time, we used to joke about, oh, when we move to the country, we'll raise alpacas. After we were here for a year, we decided that we had a lot of mowing to do, and we should get some sort of livestock to help us out, whether a goat or something like that. We looked again into alpacas. We got 3 to start with, just for our own enjoyment, and then got to learn a lot more about them. We had more interest from family and friends who wanted to come out and see them. So we got a few more. And then there was a little more interest that the public had in coming out to see.
So you mentioned that you love the animals. What do you love about them?
Oh, what most people love about them, and the thing that first attracted us to them, was they're just adorable. They love to come right up and be with you and be part of the conversation. They have big ping pong ball eyes, just real peaceful and gentle, and they're as soft as cashmere. So it's nice to get up and pet them and stroke them.
We also mentioned they're good for the environment. Can you expand on that some?
Yeah. There's a couple things that we found fascinating about alpacas in particular. One is that they don't have hooves. They have like a soft pad on their foot, like a dog. Actually, what you see that looks like a hoof is actually a toenail over it. So they're real gentle on the ground and the soil. And when they're grazing, they don't have upper teeth in the front. They just have a hard palate. So they just kind of scissor off the grass as they go, instead of pulling it out by the roots like other animals. So as far as pasture management, as soon as we see it start to look like a golf course, we know it's time to move them on to the next pasture. And
you mentioned for the herd health, possibly parasites or something like that. Is that why you rotate?
Yep. What's helpful about them is they use a communal dung pile. So that helps keep the parasites under control as well. we do give them monthly shots to protect against meningeal worm and other parasites. But yeah, we just keep them moving from pasture to pasture just to keep them on some thick, healthy grass and give that other one a chance to rest.
Well, it started with 3, and then it grew, and then you said something earlier about agritourism?
Yeah. So the first few years that we started here, we really had no interest in starting a business or even any kind of large-scale alpaca breeding operation. But after we had those first 6, then we had family wanted to come out and bring their kids and see them, and then friends of friends wanted to come out and see them, and we finally, to make better use of our time, we might as well have like a public open house. So we had one of our first open houses over the course of a weekend, and we had hundreds of people showing up. Then we realized we're onto something here as far as people really wanting that experience of coming out and seeing unique exotic animals at a farm, or just any animal at a farm. They were just as engrossed with the chickens as they were with the alpacas. So then we started to examine our business model a little bit more and see, okay, what kind of options do we have? We could either, we were limited a little bit by our physical size of the property, as well as our ability to travel around to do a lot of competitions and fairs and shows. So we turned our attention to agritourism and tried to make our farm into a place where people can come and learn about the animals, see the animals, get up close and touch them, see what kind of products are made out of the alpacas, the alpaca fiber.
So originally the animals came from South America in the 80s. They were imported for some reason. What was that?
They were fiber animal. They were originally imported primarily from Chile, Peru, and Bolivia. The Andes Mountains is where they're native to. So it was primarily for the fiber. The fiber is pretty remarkable. They're a cold weather animal. They're used to the cold temperatures of the mountains. It's as warm and as strong as wool, as sheep's wool, but it's as soft as cashmere. Some of the reasons for that is the alpaca fiber doesn't have any lanolin in it, so it doesn't have any, doesn't take any harsh chemicals to clean it for processing. And then if you look at it under a microscope, a strand of sheep's wool will have little tiny barbs on it, which is part of what gives it kind of that scratchy, itchy feeling, whereas the alpaca fiber is much more smooth. A couple other characteristics about the fiber that makes it unique is that it is actually hollow. There's trapped air inside of each strand, so it doesn't take a whole lot to be a really good insulator. So a real thin layer will keep you warm in the summer, or warm in the winter, I'm sorry, and dry and cool in the warmer months.
So Brett, what kinds of products come from the fiber? Things like gloves, mittens, scarves, sweaters, what's made from it?
Yep, those are the most popular one that people are very familiar with, the scarves, the shawls. Also socks are extremely popular. They're the most popular thing that we have. Because of the natural moisture wicking properties of the fiber, you can wear that same sock in the hottest days of summer or in the coldest days of winter, and it's going to keep you cool and dry and comfortable year-round.
Some people have a bit of a reaction or the sharpness of some fibers. Does that happen on alpaca fibers as well?
No, we haven't experienced that happening. And in fact, I do know some friends of ours who are avid knitters, crocheters, who are terribly allergic to sheep's wool and have no problem working with alpaca, either wearing it or working with it.
Well, if hundreds of people come to your farm for an open house, you must have picked up a lot of responses or reactions or interactions with your animals. What have you witnessed or seen?
One of the things that we've focused on, it's a little bit of a byproduct, because we were focused primarily on education around alpacas, but what we're finding is we've had visitors from over 30 different countries come visit us on the farm. And many have, it's the little things that we take for granted every day. We had one family who had never seen how peas were grown, and they were so enthralled by our garden. They're like, oh, it's a pea tree. And they had all sorts of questions about it. Or they'd never seen a raspberry bush, so they got a chance to eat a raspberry fresh from fresh from our raspberry bushes. We had a recent experience where a farmer came and visited who was from India, and he wanted to know how different small farms operated on this half of the planet. So we engaged in quite a lengthy conversation on our different things we grew and animals that we took care of. It's really been fascinating, and it's really expanded our horizons, and we've got a much more appreciation for things we take for granted.
Wonderful world classroom right here on your farm.
It really has been fascinating.
Yeah. And also I noticed in the gift shop, small bottles,
yeah,
with some very enriching product inside. What is that?
Enriching well. That's what we call our here on the Pauley Alpaca Company the Packapoo. In the spring of the year, in the fall, it's usually people's mind turns towards what they're going to do in the winter, and they stock up on yarn and hats and gloves. But in the spring of the year, we do a lot of business in terms of the compost and manure of the alpacas.
Sounds organic.
Oh, very much so. Very much so. The and high in nitrogen. All of our garden boxes are just filled with the compost. We although individual results may vary, we had researched online that it kept deer away from hosta, and ours got eaten by deer every year, and deer haven't touched our hosta in the last 5 years.
That's worth it alone.
Right.
And slow release on the nitrogen?
Right. Yep, very slow release. It won't burn your plants. You can put it directly on your vegetables and on your house plants, just right from the animal. It doesn't need to compost and break down. It's a little like deer pellets, and it really retains the moisture. So once that really gets stirred up and tilled into your soil, it'll retain the moisture in your soil for a long time.
Well, unlike a bovine or a cow, there's 4 compartments in the
Yep.
stomach of an animal. There's only 3 in alpaca.
Yep, 3 in an alpaca. And they only eat grass. They don't eat anything that really has seeds on it, so there's not a lot of seed or organic matter that gets into that compost. So it's a really good way to help maintain weed control in your gardens as well.
So Brett, how do people find out about the Pauley Alpaca Company?
We primarily we've been doing all of our marketing online. We have a website, pauleyalpacacompany.com, that talks a little bit about what we offer here as far as farm tours or birthday parties or the gift shop or alpacas that are for sale. We also we have a Facebook page where we post all of our open houses or any new products or any new happenings or just funny pictures of animals. And there are a lot of funny pictures of alpacas, so there's plenty to post out there. We also have a Twitter account. And the most recent use of the Twitter account was this past season of American Idol, when one of the contestants said if he won, he was gonna buy an alpaca because he thinks they're amazing. Lionel Richie had no idea what an alpaca was, so I tried through Twitter to reach out to Lionel Richie and the show's producers to say, hey, let's get Lionel Richie here. Let's name the next male born Lionel. But he hasn't showed up yet, so it's an open invitation to Lionel Richie. So
open and challenge. Bring it on.
Out there, Lionel.
Bring it on, right?
Bring it on, right?
If we come to the open house, will we have the blacksmith, your son, here doing his wear as well?
Yep. He usually does that in our fall open house, usually the last weekend in September every year, where he'll be out blacksmithing, and our daughter will be leading the horse around, and we'll teach everybody and share every animal we got.
Brett, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
Hi, this is Kent Thiesse. According to U.S. Census of Agriculture figures, Minnesota had 24,000 dairy farms in 1982, and that number dropped to only 9,600 15 years later in 1997. And by another 15 years in 2012, it had dropped even further down to 4,700 farms. The next Census of Agriculture will likely show even further declines. In the USDA Milk Production Report in May of 2018, it showed Minnesota had 450,000 dairy cows. That ranks 7th nationally. California leads the country with about 1.8 million dairy cows, and Wisconsin is second at 1.3. Other states exceeding Minnesota include New York, Idaho, Pennsylvania, and Texas. Interestingly, California's dairy cow numbers increased dramatically in the 1990s and early 2000s, and have stayed relatively stable. By comparison, Wisconsin was also at 1.8 million about 20 years ago, and now has declined to 1.3 million and stayed fairly stable. Fastest growing areas for dairy production in the U.S. have been the Southwest United States, in places like Texas and New Mexico, and in the state of Idaho. In Minnesota, Stearns County in the central part of the state continues to be the #1 dairy county as far as production and dairy cow numbers, with about 70,000 dairy cows. The next highest counties are Winona County in southeast Minnesota and Morrison County in central Minnesota, both at about 28,000 to 29,000 cows. Most counties in southern and western Minnesota saw declines of 50 to 75% in dairy cow numbers from 1980 to the early 2000s. An anomaly on this are some counties such as Stevens County in west central Minnesota, which in 2000 only had 2,200 cows and today has 22,000 cows. That's because of the influx of several large dairies in that region. There are other counties across Minnesota that have similar growth in dairy cow numbers. Overall, we will likely continue to see a decline in the number of small to medium-sized dairy farms in Minnesota due to some of the financial challenges in recent years that dairy farmers are facing. At the same time, we will probably continue to see the growth of some larger dairies that are more mechanized, more technologically advanced, and most of these larger dairy farms will continue to produce milk for more specialized processing plants across the state of Minnesota. That's all for today. We'll be back next time.
Welcome to Farm Connections. We're on the Riverland Community College campus, Austin West building. Something special today. We have a STEM Comes Alive boot camp, a technology trailer, but even more special, April Van Ruden. April, welcome.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Well, your official title is Extension Educator with a 4-H emphasis?
Yeah, I work with the 4-H program here in Mower County. So,
how long?
I've been working with the program here for just over a year. And it's been fun to continue to grow the educational opportunities for youth here in Mower County.
Well, I just watched you working with some students in a STEM camp. They looked excited. What was happening? Yeah,
we had just a really exciting activity here this morning. We did an activity where the youth built a balloon car, and it was a fun challenge for the kids because we just gave them a variety of different supplies, recycled materials, all sorts of different random things, and then told them you have 20 minutes to create a car, and then we had a little mini race at the end, and it was really a great activity for them to exercise their skills in designing. And we talked a lot about the engineering design process and how it maybe doesn't always work the very first time and how you need to continue to try over and over again. And that was a great opportunity for the group to get exposed to kind of a sneak peek of our engineering design challenge that we have here, a newer program in the 4-H program.
Well said.
Yeah.
So after the lab, they came outside and they're working at the technology table. How did what you did transition into what they're doing now with circuits, motors, currents, voltage?
Yeah, I think that the balloon cars activity was a great warm-up activity this morning to get their brains moving, to think about think creatively and think about how things work together, because when they were designing those balloon cars, they had to think about how the base was going to affect their car. They had to think about how the wheels were going to affect their car, the size of the balloon, so many different elements. And I think that's just so true in so many things that we do today, and it was a great segue into that activity where they were working with circuits so they could think creatively about how things work together.
April, think about big picture inside of 4-H. What's happening beyond the STEM camp
and the STEM activities that you do?
Yeah, so the 4-H program, many people are familiar with it, and oftentimes when you think of 4-H, you think of the county fair and showing cattle and bringing 4-H projects, and that's definitely still true today. But we're continuing to offer new programs to attract new audiences and to help to continue to develop the skills for the workplace. So this morning's activity, the balloon cars, was just a preview into our engineering design challenge, but another one of those activities in the 4-H program that is helping kids to think more creatively and to also solve the problems here in agriculture is our Science of Agriculture Challenge. And in fact, our team is competing today at the University of Minnesota campus with a project where at the beginning of the season, back in November, they were given the prompt that they needed to solve a problem in agriculture. So totally wide open. The team was able to pick something of their interest. So a couple of members on that team are very interested in the sheep project. And they had been hearing their parents talk about how the price of sheep meat hasn't been where they would like it to be. So the team set out to find out why that was. And they did a number of research projects here the last couple of months, surveying random people to find out their preference onto sheep meat and those sorts of things. And another really neat thing about that is the team got to work with industry experts in the field. So here in Austin, we're really lucky that we have Hormel in town, so they were able to work with food scientists and statisticians down at the Hormel Institute to kind of analyze the findings of their project, and they also helped them with setting up the project as well. So I think that Science of Agriculture Challenge is really a neat opportunity for kids here in agriculture, and even kids that are not in agriculture, to come and learn more about agriculture and learn more about the industry and continue to become leaders.
Well, April, we know that not everybody produces food. In fact, about 2% of the population produces for the other, well, all of us, 100%.
Yeah.
But the other 98% need jobs, and we need them as production agriculture people. So how does this camp and 4-H fit into what can be done to support farmers and agriculture?
Yeah, Dan, I think you bring up a great point that we continue to need to feed a growing population, but we have fewer and fewer people involved directly with agriculture. So we need to continue to help people, young people, develop the skills that they can go out to help us produce food to feed everybody. And I think this camp is a perfect fit for that. Some of the activities in 4-H also work to help support that by helping kids develop the skills to learn and lead so that they can help us continue to feed that growing population while coming up with creative and innovative solutions.
Well, keep up the good work, April, and let's keep working together.
Yeah, thank you, Dan.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Farm Connections. Stay tuned for more coming up next.
Even in counties where agriculture is the primary economic driver, there can still be a disconnect about modern farming. Martin County is one of Minnesota's leading ag production counties. It's also home to ethanol plants and soybean processing facilities, as well as several innovative ag technology companies. Ag and economic leaders recently organized a modern agriculture tour to highlight the sometimes unseen impact of agriculture.
This is an opportunity for us to celebrate agriculture, really the backbone of Martin County, and from a Visit Fairmont perspective, how it impacts and affects tourism. We also have some local partners with the Fairmont Economic Development Authority and how agriculture affects and impacts economic development, as well as the Fairmont Area Chamber of Commerce and how agriculture affects local business in our community.
And we want people to really understand what all agriculture is in Martin County. And it does span from the actual farmer on the farm to seed dealers, processors. We also have a number of manufacturers here locally who have come up with their own inventions that have just made a national presence as well. So it really is the backbone of our economy here.
The invitation-only event brought legislators and other community leaders to the region to learn more about the innovation and economic activity that's occurring because of modern agriculture. For farmers and non-farmers alike, the Martin County Modern Ag Tour helps to bridge the gap that can sometimes occur between farmers and non-farmers.
We've become so far removed from farm life anymore. There are so few farmers left that this is a way to connect and make it real to everybody. Seeing and feeling is the best way to learn something.
One thing farmers and agribusiness groups are getting better at is telling their stories to politicians and the consuming public. In Martin County, they put a lot of emphasis on agriculture, and they're proud of what they do. And they're telling that story at events like the one here today. This is Lynn Kettleson reporting.
In a time when niche markets and all of agriculture feels the push and pull of our ever-changing demands and uncertain futures, it has become imperative that we continue to adapt as our markets continue to evolve. I'm Dan Hoffman. Thank you for joining us today on Farm Connections.